This episode of Beyond the Tube is proudly sponsored by Spewy, the original waterproof, absorbent, and machine washable mat designed by Aussie parents for parents. From messy mealtimes to tube feeding spills, Spewy makes cleanups quicker, easier, and far less stressful. Welcome back to Beyond the Tube. Today, we are lucky enough to be joined by the wonderful Reidena, who is a care coordinator. Now, you may be wondering what that is, and that's absolutely what we're going to unpack today. Basically, the role that Reidena does is looks after NDIS coordination, management of different specialists and referrals, and is the conduit between all of those things. I think we're going to get a lot out of this episode. Welcome to the podcast, Reidena.
Thank you.
So happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I think the first thing I want to know, and I reckon pretty much everybody who's listening today will want to know, is what is a care coordinator?
Basically, my role involves a lot of advocacy. I make sure that families and participants are heard. I help bridge the gap between medical professionals, support workers, and families.
Okay. It sounds very complex. Like there's obviously a lot to do in that role.
Yeah, it can be. It can be very, very complex. There's a lot to juggle in just the NDIS space, but then when you add the medical profession into that, it can be quite complex.
How do families access a care coordinator? Are they everywhere?
Unfortunately, no, they're not. My role as a care coordinator is something that my organisation absorbs as a structural cost of their business. It can be quite difficult. That's where I find that like parents kind of become their own coordinator, like their own care coordinator, because they are the ones that have that lived experience with their child. They are like natural coordinators, really, when you think about how much you coordinate as a parent.
Definitely. Absolutely. How would a family or a medical parent go about finding a care coordinator?
That's really difficult because I find that's care coordination is not typically funded through NDIS at all. It's kind of where you have to be your own like expert in your child. You could lean into your support coordinator, which can, give you the right NDIS referrals and services. But when it comes to medical, that's the medical side of coordination. That's something that many parents will have to take on that role themselves.
Yeah, right. It's not typically funded with NDIS and obviously not easily available out in the medical space, I guess, and the NDIS space. It's not something that's typically there. Interesting. It's very, very interesting. I mean, it's great that your company absorbs that cost and your role exists.
Yeah.
But it definitely sounds like it's a bit of an open space that potentially has a market for.
Absolutely, because it is really difficult, particularly without any sort of medical knowledge, to pull together your NDIS supports and then the medical needs on top of that. It's really hard to mesh the two together. I find that my role in my organisation is so crucial.
Absolutely. There would be a lot of parents out there that don't understand the technical parts to their medical issues with their child. I know it's something that I had to sort of learn when Ezra started having all these medical issues, and not just being able to know what they were for myself, but being able to then relay that information. I'd been to see a specialist, so I had to go back to my GP and then give him the information. Then you've given him that. Now I go to a different specialist and I've got to give him that information. They want to hear it from you, or I guess in your case, they probably want to hear it from you as the coordinator, rather than reading a referral or reading a medical note. They want to know from you what is going on. Do you find that?
Yeah, 100%, because quite often the medical notes don't contain the little nuances that you as a carer or a parent have access to. There's little changes that might be significant that your specialist might not have noted, but you notice as the main carer. You're the one constant in your person's life.
Definitely. Are there cases where people can, through NDIS, request funding for care coordination specifically, or is it just completely cut out?
It's not something I've ever heard of, to be honest. For it to be funded through NDIS, it's more an organisational need. I manage so many participants and all of their care needs. It was necessary to have that conduit between medical, between NDIS, between families, because I go between all of them.
Absolutely. Yeah, you would have to be connecting all of those
all of those dots between everybody. Yeah. Okay. So it would definitely come down to each family finding out from the organization, do they have a care coordinator?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Rather than trying to get it through NDIS.
Yeah, I think so.
That's really good to know. I think that's a practical step that people can ask, or as you said, get the funding for support coordination and use that to the best of its ability, which obviously isn't as medical, but it probably also depends on the support coordinator that you get.
Yeah, absolutely, because you do have your specialist support coordinators who do have that higher level knowledge.
Now, I want to tap into your knowledge and
Okay.
obviously what you know and what you do on the day to day, what your bread and butter is, and provide practical steps that parents can use. Managing referrals and managing and balancing appointments for all medical families, whether that's a tubie kid or not, there's a lot. There's a lot of doctor's appointments, there's a lot of specialist appointments, hospital appointments. We haven't even got to allied health yet. So
No.
there's a lot going on,
Yep.
going on. How can families best prepare for these appointments? Let's say, for example, Ezra has an appointment with our ENT. What is the best way I can prepare for that appointment and then any subsequent other specialist appointments perhaps after that?
Yeah, for sure. Biggest tip I have is to document everything. You want to make sure that if you have a list of questions that you need to answer, write them down, because in that moment in the appointment, you're very likely to forget what it is. You need to stay coordinated and organized so that you don't get off track, because if you're anything like me, I'm very easily sidetracked. When I'm discussing things, I need to keep my points clear so I can tick them off as I go. I also recommend bringing things like medication lists from your GP, just to make sure that your specialist is aware of every single medication or supplement or over-the-counter kind of medication that your person is taking. I also am a strong advocate for bringing someone with you to the appointment, because there's nothing worse than trying to have a serious discussion with your specialist and your person is like trying to talk to you and they want to be engaged with, and you need someone to take care of that for you so that you can make sure you get all of the information that you need. It's so
Definitely.
important. It really is. If you're going to your ENT, like, you want to make notes of, have they had chest infections, all of those sort of medical needs that they've had that you've noted.
Yeah.
Keep track of that. Keep a log of that if you can. On this day, they had a chest infection. There's so many things that it could be the result of that need to be escalated. But once again, if you're not taking notes and you're not keeping records, you're very likely to forget that.
100%. Absolutely. I know that most of our listeners and our viewers will remember, and I feel like I've mentioned this multiple times, episode 8 that we did way back now, I think it was July, with Sam from HEBA. He actually went through all of the information around the app and how to make that sort of work best for parents. I think the best thing that we learnt from that episode was that it's used as a tool to record. If you've got a chest infection, record it in there, because what you can get it to do is actually produce you a report or even a graph that shows, how many times that kid has had a chest infection, how many times they've been sick, how many times, whatever. It will produce it all for you. It's not adding in an extra step in our lives. We're on our phones all the time, let's be honest. So it's just opening an app, putting a little note in. You can track weight, you can track height, all of those things specialists are going to want to know, right? Like they want to know this stuff.
They want to know the ins and outs. They want to know everything that you know about your person. Weight fluctuations. Have they been vomiting? What they look for are the trends as well. They've had chest infections. Have they had vomiting in correlation with that? Have they potentially aspirated? There's so many little nuances in that. That's why it's so important to track absolutely everything.
I agree. Yeah. And I do all of those things.
Yep.
I'm glad that I'm following your instructions. Hopefully what it will do is give people who may not know, they may not have gone down that road yet, or they just may not do that at the moment, now to think, oh, okay, I can make sure I do that next time. I really think a big one that you said was having someone with you. I think that's a huge one.
Yep. It really is, because there's nothing worse than trying to really focus and trying to remember everything that you need to communicate across. And questions you have and clarifications you need to make, and then trying to keep your person distracted and engaged. And it's a challenge. It really, really is. No matter how old they are, to be honest, it's always a challenge.
Absolutely. A lot of the time I take Ezra's support worker with me. She's an ex-nurse and midwife, so she's got lots of clinical background, which is really helpful when you're talking to specialists and, pediatrician and whatnot. It's very helpful. I think I'm pretty good in understanding the lingo and whatnot, but because she has that certification, I think they tend to take it a little more seriously.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, or otherwise.
100%.
That does really, really help. Often we get in the car after the appointment and we talk. I'll say, oh, it was really interesting when he said this, or it was really interesting when he said that, or what do you think about this? And she'll give me some feedback, which is really, I find that really helpful as part of processing, but also because sometimes our opinions differ. It's good to be like, oh, I was thinking this. And she's like, I think it's probably more like this. And you're like, oh, I didn't think about it like that. I really think that is an excellent point. If you can, take someone with you.
Absolutely.
I know another big thing that you would obviously face day to day and families out there are facing constantly is long wait lists to get in and see a specialist, whether that's a pediatrician or a specialist doctor. What's your advice for managing that? And maybe circumstances change, or you feel that the receptionist that you're speaking to hasn't quite understood where your child is at and maybe they haven't prioritized that referral correctly. How do parents navigate that?
If you feel like your child has deteriorated from your original referral, go back to your GP. They are your biggest advocate in this circumstance. Get them to escalate the referral, because they can send through a second or a third or a fourth referral with more information, particularly around deterioration, because that should bump you up the list. I also find that sometimes the hospitals might lose your referral. You call them up to check on it and it's not there. I've had that happen with a couple of my clients, so much so that we physically took a copy of the referral to the hospital and handed it to them in person.
Wow.
I keep digital backups of everything, print out hard copies to deliver them in person if need be. But definitely go back to the GP.
Okay, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Do you have like a checklist or something that you could maybe share with us that we could, post on our socials, or something that parents could use as a practical tool?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of what I do is in my head. It's very organic. And I have a very interesting brain. So I can absolutely put something down on paper to give to you guys to attach to the show today, so that people can have their little checklist of what to do.
That would be so great. On top of everything that medical parents deal with, having a little checklist that you can sort of go through and go, okay, I've got everything I need for today's appointment. I've got my list. I've gone through it. I'm prepared. I've got my questions. I've got the test results, or whatever it is that you might need to take with you. All of those kinds of things. I've got all of those things with me. I'm ready to roll. Now I just need to go to the appointment.
Yeah, that's right.
On the back of that, advocacy and communication is obviously, they come hand in hand, and they're two really big things that we talk about a lot in this space, and typically a lot when we're talking about NDIS. How do you manage families who perhaps feel unheard, maybe with NDIS, maybe with their specialist, maybe with their pediatrician, maybe they're waiting to get in to see someone like we've just touched on, and they just don't feel like people are kind of getting it. Maybe that's the GP, not quite understanding the severity going on in that person's world. What do you do to advocate for those kinds of people, and what tools could other people use to advocate for themselves?
Honestly, I'm a pest. I am an absolute pest. I am in constant communication with the specialists or the receptionists, or I attend medical appointments and I be a pest. I ask the hard questions. I'm pushing for what they need. I advocate hard. That is probably my top tip there is you need a pest, an absolute pest.
I agree.
Yeah.
I've done the same thing. I've escalated things to our local minister as well. I've taken things to the health minister. I definitely think, I know it takes time, and I know that so many of our medical families are time poor. I work a 40-hour week in 4 days and then have a medical child on top of that and all the appointments and everything. I understand what time poor looks like, but I do take time out of, the few hours that I have left in a day where I like to, sit and chill and have a hot chocolate and watch some YouTube. I will write letters or emails, as they generally go now, to people like the local minister and be like, this is not good enough and I need your help.
Yep, absolutely.
You're our minister. Advocate for me and my child in this situation. And I have always found that tends to turn into results.
Yeah, absolutely. Like once you identify what the barrier is, you can work out your ways around it. Is that you go to your local health minister? Do you go to your local member for parliament? We've also had to do that around funding cuts and whatnot to our participant plans. There's always someone higher you can talk to, always.
I agree. Escalate, annoy.
100% harass. You go back and, you ask the hard questions. Why can't we do this? Why won't this work? Why? Do your own research as well. Research as much as possible and ask questions. A lot of times I've gone to a specialist and I've had a specific thought in my head and I'm like, why can't we do this? And then they go, okay, these are the reasons why we can't do this. And I'm like, okay, cool. Good to know I was on the wrong track. What do we do now? What's the next step? How do we help now? And you keep pushing that sort of angle.
That's good. That's a really good tip. I have also been known to do that.
You have to, because if you don't ask the question, you'll never know.
That's exactly right. And they don't know what you're thinking.
No, that's right.
Which is another big thing. They're not aware. They may assume that you already have an answer to your question.
Correct. And I
So you
think
definitely have to ask them.
absolutely, and ask them to explain it to you without the jargon. In layman's terms, nice and simple so that everyone can understand and you absolutely know where you stand or where your child stands in the situation. A lot of the times your medical professionals are fantastic. They know their stuff, but they speak with jargon. A lot of the times it's very confusing. There's so many medical acronyms. Just cut the jargon.
Keep it simple. The KISS simple. Ensuring that we have got that communication between the GP and us or the pediatrician and us. And then obviously our care team grows, specialists become involved, and then we've got allied health supports and all of those things. How do we ensure clear communication between all of these people?
See, that's the hard part, right? A lot of these people, they don't interact. That's where you as the parent are the conduit. You need to get your reports from your physio, from your OT, take it to your specialist if you need to, and vice versa, because the specialist recommendations need to be fed back into your allied health team as well. That's where you become that conduit because you are the one constant and the one expert in your child's life because you live that experience day to day. You are best placed to provide that information.
Absolutely. I agree. It is tiring. It is cumbersome. And I get frustrated with having to do that some of the time, probably when our cups are feeling like they're overflowing, that you're like, I just don't want to do this anymore. I wish you would talk to this person. Asking for that up front, I've found through a bit of trial and error that's been quite helpful, particularly in the allied health space. Yes. I think that's quite good.
The allied health, I find, are generally more approachable to reach out to your specialist, whereas your specialists are like, I'm so busy, I see so many patients, whereas your allied health, they are definitely more reasonable in knowing that there does need to be that collaboration. Even though everybody's busy, collaboration is so important in making sure that your person's needs are met.
100%. I definitely agree with all of that. The other thing is once you build trust and a relationship with your team over time, it becomes easier for the natural flow of communication. I know with Ezra's ENT recently, his dietitian had said, this is what I think. This is what I think you need to say to him from my perspective as the dietitian. See how you go. I'll send him an email as well. And I'll let him know these are my thoughts, but Fiona is going to reiterate this stuff. And of course, when I went and saw him, he'd seen the email. I reiterated everything as was discussed. And he was like, no, I agree. And I think this is very helpful having this information. He didn't go back to her and say, yes, we're going to, do another surgery. He allowed me to let her know that. But there was that open communication between the two of them, whereby if he did think, well, I don't quite understand what that means, or how does she think this links to that in relation to my services as an ENT, that channel was then open. So they were able to have that conversation should they need to, which I think is really helpful.
Oh, definitely.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you see in your role that families could experience themselves?
The length of time that your referrals are triaged, that is by far the biggest pain point for myself. Is waiting months or longer can be super disheartening, especially when your child's needs are so urgent. It's really difficult. And that's where your persistence in going back to them and saying, okay, this is what I need, to back to your GP saying, I need help.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. Wait times are the worst. They are truly the worst.
It's awful. And it's also hard because a lot of times you don't really know what support is out there because, the system as we know it is not always transparent, unfortunately. So unless you've got someone that can point you in the right direction, it's impossible to know every service that is out there.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I think if you get a good support coordinator, often they can help and go like, did you know we could do this? If you've already got a plan approved with NDIS, that may mean you need to do a change in situation or something like that. But there are ways to do it. You don't know what you don't know.
No, that's right.
It's a simple fact.
Yeah. 100%.
So you've just got to take what you can get from the support you have around you. And I think things like, this podcast, forums, Facebook groups, different types of Instagram pages and things like that, where people who have lived the experience share their experience to try and help others.
That is so helpful. It is so helpful because it's so easy to feel like overwhelmed and isolated. You're juggling daily care needs, appointments, piles of paperwork. You feel like you are carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. It's so hard navigating the medical system. Like as a parent myself, the hardest part isn't actually the medical complexity of your child's situation. It is the emotional toll of navigating it all and feeling overwhelmed and isolated. It's so hard.
Absolutely. I always try to explain to people who don't have a medical child, remember the last time your child was sick. I don't mean a little sniffly cold or, you sent them to school because you thought, they're okay. I mean the last time that they were sick and you thought, I'm on the borderline of taking my child to ED. Like, I'm concerned. The level of concern has gone up. It could just be that they've had a raging fever and you can't seem to get it down, where you start to get a little worried. Imagine feeling like that every day of your life about your child.
It is so overwhelming. It is so
much.
Lot. Yeah.
It's a lot. And I think, there's a lot of people out there who are in a similar situation to us. Ezra has no diagnosis.
That's hard. That is so hard.
No name. There's nothing attached to it. There's no reason. What do you do? And as a parent, what do? You keep advocating, you keep pushing, you keep doing all of these things. You put your trust and your faith into specialists and doctors who hopefully know what they're doing.
Yes.
And have your child's best interest at heart, which I truly in my heart believe our team do. This is why I'm confident and comfortable to do these things, because I think it's a bit like creating a sculpture. You've got to chip away at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Piece by piece.
Yep.
This is just another piece of this sculpture that we're chipping away at. It's really, really hard to be patient when you're talking about your kid.
It is, because you want it fixed now.
And that's why wait times and sitting with referrals piled up to wazoo, waiting to get in and talk to somebody is so frustrating, because you're like, I need you to see my kid. There's nobody more important than my child.
Yeah, that's right. That is exactly right. And it's really hard when people don't have that same sense of urgency that you do. It's so difficult.
Going back to the tip you gave earlier around going back to your GP, if things have shifted, even if it's only a slight shift, if that means that they can go back and advocate for you again, then why not?
Yep, absolutely. Lean in where you can to the specialists and the medical professionals that you have. Unfortunately, the medical specialists, they see concerns by you as, that's parenting. Parents are concerned about their kids. But when the concern comes from another medical professional, they take it more seriously.
I agree. And same in my experience as well. Absolutely. Couple more questions for you. What are the simple tools or strategies that could help parents to stay organized?
Keep folders, files, whether they be digital or hard copy. Keep yourself organized, because the more organized you are, the easier it is for you to find the information you need to take to your appointments. Keep your daily diaries. You track their food, fluid, bowel, sleep, anything that's relevant to any of your specialists. If they have, say, a PEG, make sure you're monitoring that PEG site. Has there been any discharge? Is there any redness? Have you noticed any trends in that? Definitely prepare the questions in advance. Like that's
Yes.
my biggest thing. I also sometimes take photographs. So you know what it's like? Your child is perfect when they go to a specialist. They're in perfect health. And a week later, all of a sudden, there's when I take my participants to appointments, I have photos of what their PEG site last looked at when it was inflamed. What recommendations do you have? I take photos of everything.
That is a tip. And photos and videos are important, particularly for any of our tubey kids who don't eat or eat very minimally, and they're trying to understand what their oral intake is like, and it's very hard when you're talking to another human who eats orally.
Yes.
To try and explain no oral intake of so minute. Ezra eats like a baby bird, like it's the tiniest little pieces. Now what I do is try and take photographs of what he's had in the week leading up to that appointment. It just might be one meal. It's not necessarily going to be, 3 meals plus all the snacks he gets offered. It's not necessarily like that. It could be a photo of, this is what I sent in his lunchbox for preschool. This is what came home. So they can understand. When you say you give him a sandwich with jam on it and you cut the crust off and they're 4 tiny little squares, which are 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters, and he's had 1/18 of one of the squares, it's much easier to describe with a visual than just to describe.
Absolutely. Always.
I'm definitely on board with that. The more evidence, the better. Going back to wait lists and referrals, there is no reason why when we send a referral to a specialist that we can't show evidence at that time. If you're seeing your GP and you're like, look at this, what's happening, whatever that case may be, if you've got evidence, if you've got photographs, send them to your GP. Get them to attach it to that referral so that when it gets triaged by that doctor's team, yes, the receptionist may not understand, but hopefully it'll be enough for them to read and see and go, I might need to go and actually take this to the specialist. Could you just cast your eyes over this? Perhaps this one needs to be escalated.
Absolutely. The more information you can give them, the better.
Things that set you aside from other people, because everybody has got a piece of paper that says, my doctor says this. Every person has that. So if you've got, my doctor says this, plus here's some images of evidence, this is what a day in the life looks like. Or it could just be a statement from you as a parent. I know it's painful and it's another step and we shouldn't have to take it, but the reality is this is what we're facing.
Yeah, absolutely. You would rather be more prepared and doing that than sitting on the wait list and waiting to be triaged still, when you could have that little extra that helps bump you up the list.
I want to ask you one more thing. What are your top 2 or 3 tips for navigating the health system successfully when you have a medically complex child?
Be persistent and consistent. Chase those referrals, chase those appointments. I can't even tell you how many times we've received a letter for an appointment with a medical specialist on the day of the appointment.
Interesting.
That's happened to me way too many times. We chase those referrals and just be consistent, keeping consistent contact with those specialist receptionists always. Another one would be do your research. Ask questions. Don't be scared to ask questions, because if you don't ask, you will never know.
I agree.
Staying organized by keeping your records, writing your questions down. Records are your best friend. Documentation, your best friend.
I agree. 1, 2, and 3, 100%. Thank you so much for what you've provided with tips and tricks and just how to manage medical life in a more pragmatic way. I think that it's really going to help people to practically put steps into place that maybe they haven't been doing, maybe they've done some, not everything. This can cover all children. It doesn't have to be someone who's, very unwell or hugely medically complex. It can cover a whole lot of people. It doesn't have to be kids either. It could be adults.
Exactly.
This has been really helpful. Thank you so much for your time and going through this with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
I'm glad you've enjoyed it. Thank you again to Reidena for joining us. Until next time, stay safe and we'll see you soon.
A big thank you to Spewy for supporting this episode. Head to their Instagram page at SpewyAU to see their full range. And as a Beyond the Tube listener, you'll get 15% off your next purchase with the code BEYOND. A big thanks again to Spewy for supporting our Tubey community.